Dr. Umar back in the saddle again.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
Dr.
I don't really listen to a lot of his stuff, but this one was a bar.
And let's get right into it.
Once you have fornicated multiple times, you have now developed preferences. This is why God never wanted for us to have out of marriage. Once you've experienced things that you should have only experienced within wedlock, you develop preferences. So when you meet a really good woman, she's everything you need, but she can't turn it up in the bedroom like that freak can. You may pass up on your soulmate because she can't please you like the freak. And a lot of people have lost out on good relationships because they didn't come with freak of the week talent. I've had women, sisters admit it. I should have married him, but he couldn't turn it up in the bedroom.
I don't really listen to a lot of Dr. Umar stuff. Don't really follow him a whole ton.
But
But I
what's your
feel
take
like
on this? Yeah, what's your
this
take on
was
this little ditty he dropped?
it,
No,
it
no,
was
no
a
ditty.
bar. No pun intended, right? I feel like it was a bar. I mean, it was something that spoke to me and resonated with me because I feel like I've been through that where I feel like I look back and I reflect and I feel like I might have passed up on some good options or some good choices because of the preferences I built up
Mm-hmm.
being with people sexually before marriage. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a real thing. A lot of us do build up preferences, and I think it's something that we talked about last season. How a lot of the way we try to live life today is customizable. Everything is what I want and based on this, and you know what I mean. In real time, the job that you want or need, the person that you might need in your life, the kind of person, the archetype or whatever you might be willing to pass up on because of something you experienced in the past. And it's like, I don't know. How do you reconcile that? I've been there. I have definitely been there. And I think, we all do have preferences and I think that's a real thing and they exist. And I don't know if there's anything wrong with them. But I think to me the greater takeaway that I got from this is if your preferences kind of, you know, get you off path for something that could be greater for you, and that's all you rely on is just this is what I want my relationship to live up to because I've experienced it in the past, or how I want my life to be because I've experienced something like this or X in the past. You'll just be living in the past. You know what I mean? There really is no hope for a future and something like that.
So I agree. I agree with Dr. Umar's take. I agree with Dr. Umar's stance that the reason why I believe God did not want us to have sex before marriage is because it has a tendency, for most, not all, to endanger or endanger our ability or endanger our chances of finding the right person that we can build with. Now, I don't believe in soulmates. I don't believe in that. I think there's multiple people that could fit the bill of being an ideal spouse or long-term partner for you, but it's up to you to determine who that long-term spouse would be, the pros and cons, because everyone has strengths and everyone has weaknesses. 80-20 rule, 80% you like, 20% you don't like. Someone's 20% looks different than the next person, even though you may have two people who have similar attitudes, personalities, and values and backgrounds. But it will play out, as someone once said, marriage is like a fingerprint. Everyone has a fingerprint, but every fingerprint's unique, and so is every marriage. I think that the challenge is the type of sex that we've been having in the last 20, let's say 60 years of public sex. Now, I'm not saying the sex didn't exist before with brothels and private houses and private parties, but in popular kind of mainstream life, the type of sex you've been having, which some people may call indiscriminate sex with multiple partners, group play, more prominent, sex with drugs and other types of substances mixed in. There's just been a kind of unshackling of the traditional mores, which are of the 1950s, quote unquote, assuming that the 1950s was as pure as people say it was. I wouldn't know. I wasn't there. But assuming that it was, when you get to the 60s and 70s, free love, people just having, again, sex with whomever they want, the birth control pills at play, people are getting it in, and getting it in, people are catching diseases. Then boom, 70s, 80s hit, and we have AIDS. HIV rather. And I think that this type of sex that people have been engaging in has led a lot of people into different avenues of pleasure, trauma, challenges, and questions that when they finally get around to trying to find a mate, they are untethered from a community that can help them make a better choice that is informed around the vision or future together, but is also informed about where they're at and who they want to become and what they've been through. You don't have that community there because you're just untethered, because you haven't built community, because a lot of the types of sex that we've been having has been about meeting different partners from different places and different spaces, whether you're talking racially, geographically, interest or taste wise. And when it comes down to quote unquote settle down, you're not tethered to a community. That's how it was historically for many, many centuries. You got married out of a community. You got married based on a community, even if it was an arranged marriage. You weren't just an arranged marriage and with somebody, 5,000 miles away. It might have been some X amount of miles away, or in some cases when you're dealing with, really wealthy or rich people, the royalty. But for most people, you were, village to village or somebody who was relatively close. That is just, a different bear, so to speak, than what we've traditionally had, or what we have, currently. Not traditionally, but what we have currently. And I think he's right that type of sex and those types of sex acts can increase the likelihood of you being so caught up in the pleasure or interest or spectacle of it that you lose track of what it actually means to have a healthy partner or have a healthy process that leads to having a healthy marriage. Because your process ultimately leads to the healthy marriage, but you don't just become healthy with having six-pack abs. You have processes that lead to six-pack abs. Same thing with marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that he's even mentioning why God didn't necessarily want us to practice this outside of marriage speaks to, something that's a part of the human nature. You know what I mean? If we get a taste of something too early, um, it may take away from the novelty of being able to appreciate it and value it in its highest sense, you know what I mean, when you're supposed to have it. So to kind of, apply it to what he's talking about, I would say, like, you're mentioning God not wanting you to do it before marriage. How many people are really willing to wait to find that person that they feel divinely called to actually build with?
I mean, I don't know about waiting. Waiting is a hard thing because we're dealing with traumas, we're dealing with abuse, we're dealing with so many factors around encountering sex and, frankly, other forms of assault. But just dealing with the topic of sex, I don't think it's so much that the sex just goes into your memory and it just becomes so hard to erase that bomb head. That great anal sex. Whew. Boy, he ate me out. I think there are people in the pantheons of greatness in people's own little setups, right? Oh man, it was that
Hmm.
guy from 1982. Oh, it was her from 2015, or it was this person, it was that person. I think it's more about what you get used to. And again, being untethered from a community. So, this is what I mean from what I was saying earlier. I believe community is important for setting certain standards and helping you understand certain aspects of yourself and challenging those aspects to get to a better understanding of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish in a long-term relationship. Again, I think it's that this process is not there. And once you look up and maybe you're in your late 30s, you're in your 40s, let's say you're 20 years of just getting it in, Now you want to be with somebody, but you are so concretized, or your sense of taste is crystallized. Your sense of what works for you sexually is crystallized, and you let that determine
Yeah, that's your
who you
compass.
want to be with. I guess this is maybe what Dr. Umar is saying, so I'm not saying anything, extra or great, but this is what Dr. Umar is saying, right? It becomes so important to you that you don't have a community that says, yeah, that's important. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but have you thought about insurance? Have you thought about where you're going to live?
Healthcare and
Have
all,
you
yeah.
thought about your mom? Have you thought about that person's mom? Have you thought about, where you're going to live? Have you thought about, you're older now. What does it mean to be an older parent if you want to have children? All these other aspects of a healthy, great life that most people say they want. I'm not saying that in itself is healthy. I'm saying this is what people are saying are healthy. Isn't there because it's harder to do it. Your experiences in themselves are what become a barrier to getting forward, because that's all you have is your barrier. You don't have another process to get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, so that becomes your compass, and that's the only thing you follow. That's the only light that's guiding your path to your person. Now, I feel you. I mean, you take off other considerations off the tables. Like, you're not thinking about this person's 5 or 10 year plan, or how they plan to provide for the family, or what kind of background that they had growing up. Do they know how to be a good listener or a good communicator? Do they know all of these different things? It's like, nah, but they know how to they know how to turn it up in the bedroom, as he said. They
They
know
know
how
how
to
to
be
eat
that.
that cat.
Hey, they know a couple of superhead techniques. They know how to twirl that tongue and gawk gawk 3000 and all of that stuff. And yeah, and that becomes the preference that starts, yeah, being your guide. But it's tough though, man. Like you said, once you've done it multiple times, which I feel like, by the time the average person is 21 in our society, they've definitely fornicated multiple times. You've already built up a preference at early 20s. I would say
Well,
the average person in our society. So
well,
when you go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, please. I don't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was going to
Please.
say, when you think about the numbers and kind of scale that up to what, you know, that could be, even if you just take that average person today, so many people already at early 20s have the kind of preferences that he's talking about can distract you from making a good decision for a mate. So when you start thinking about the age that most people are, kind of pushing people towards, which is like late 20s, early 30s, by then the preferences are like, those are your top five. Top five, I'm alive.
And that's off one LP. I helped the game, it didn't help me.
Exactly.
Said I
So it's
copped
like,
your.
how do you come out of that? How do you not, you know, have those preferences be part of your matrix assessments?
Well, you can't. I mean, that's just it is what it is. Once you feel it, you can't not feel it. You cannot not experience it. You cannot not enjoy it.
Right.
I think for some people, and I said this to you, taking a step further, I think for some people, when they reflect on who they are, they may be happy with just a set of experiences that they accrue or exchange with, and once they have that, they move on. So let me give you an example. You could have a young guy, he's watched porn from maybe late tweens to early 20s. He does a couple of porn, he watches a couple of pornos, so then he acts out a couple of pornos. Maybe he does a 3-way. He does some stuff. He goes to Las Vegas, sleeps with a professional woman. He's got it out of his system. Now he's able to kind of move on. And if he gets married and he's fine, and if his wife starts having sex, he knows how to either satisfy himself on the side with a professional woman, or he will, or he will, cheat with a woman, maybe at his job or something. But he's going to be okay being married, because these things are just acts that he knows how to satisfy really quickly. He's not tethered to, a particular option or a particular set of experiences that he needs to have at a certain level. I think where you get into problems with people who just don't have that ability, people who just don't have the flexibility to just let sex be sex. Sex becomes important. Sex becomes a guiding light. And those kinds of people just need what they need, and they're going to keep it moving no matter what.
I feel like I'm one of those people on the low.
Same here. I mean, when you look at the bell curve, right? I had someone tell me recently, we were talking about this, and you look at the bell curve, they're like, yo, most people are in the middle. Most guys just don't mind as long as they have a warm, hot place. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I came, you good? Oh, no, you're not good. Either way, came, good night, good night. That's it. But then you have people on the low who are super not into it. They're just they're dragging. Doesn't work. But on the other hand of that bell curve, right on the right side, you got some craftsmen.
Mm-hmm.
If sex was an RPG game, they wouldn't level up their person 100 HP. They've gone through every cinder cycle of training and skill building. They got one of the most incredible mages or knights that you can see in that RPG, because when it comes to them, sex is just that much more important and great to them.
Yeah.
And I obviously you're like that and I'm like that, and that's just what it is.
Yeah. I'm definitely not on the left side of that bell curve. But I might lean more towards between the middle and the right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Sometimes I feel like uh it means a lot, and it is everything. Sometimes I want it to be theoretically I want it to be the glue that keeps me and somebody together, our chemistry and our physical or intimate connection. But other times I'm just like, you just want to be in that person's space. You just want to be around them. You don't necessarily need to interact with them physically or sexually or intimately or anything.
Pause. So I got a migraine last night, and I feel like some of it's coming back again. That's why I wasn't able to do much last night. I actually ran for about 5 miles yesterday because the migraine brain likes exercise. So I just got up just to take. I was doing well with the Aleve, but I was like, let me just take this migraine med just to blast it out.
Yeah, sometimes you got to do that and get up and walk around for a second.
Yeah, well, I just took the migraine med, so I'm supposed to be seeing my migraine doctor pretty soon. I'm supposed to see her this month, but she had pushed it back to May. I forgot I did grand jury duty, so hopefully this will work out because I'm going to have to see her.
I'm like, sure, don't be pushing my appointments back. Not with the way this migraine is moving.
I think anytime I change my diet, that's what happens. So
Mm.
sometimes I just feel like I'm fighting with my body, dude. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I feel you. I feel you. That's real. Especially, you know, I heard it from a lot of people in their 40s that starts happening.
yeah. All right, so I'm gonna count to 5 silently,
Hmm.
and then we're gonna do pick it up about chemistry. I'll say something because you just responded to it. Chemistry. So that's the part that matters to you.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's all that matters.
Mm. But what about compatibility? Because we touched on this before.
But so sometimes chemistry is all that matters. Other times it's compatibility. Other times it's the comfort that I feel like I can have with somebody emotionally. Um, you know, feeling like I'm a match for them intellectually, or not being intimidated by some of the topics that they might bring up, feeling challenged or things like that. Sometimes I want that, but other times it's really just like, yo, I just need to know that I can connect with them physically, and the intimacy will be, you know, top 10. I'll say it again.
Mm. Let's shift gears a minute. Dr. Umar's talking about God and God's prohibition about sex before marriage.
Hmm.
What is your take on that as somebody who walks with the Lord here on the planet Earth in this 3D experience we call life? Do you think it's wrong to have sex before marriage?
Man, that's tough. It's tough. Um, Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I've felt, you know, what people might call your conscience, or you know, your internal spirit or spirit. I have felt when I had the opportunity in front of me, I have felt that voice be like, "Yo, not tonight. Maybe this time ain't good for you." You know what I mean? It's like, you know, Paul does say everything is legal, but not everything is beneficial. So it's like, you know, yeah, you have the choice and the right to do so. It's your body, but not every time you do it is going to produce a good result for you. Even the pleasure you think you might get is temporary, but it might come with some baggage on the back end. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just think it's not always beneficial for you to engage.
Mm.
Or I would say for me to engage. It's definitely been times because, you know, I've talked about it openly on the pod before, how many partners I've had in life. So it's like, how could I say it's wrong? And I've, you know, taken down as many people as I have. So, you know, I definitely feel like there is some benefit to holding off, not engaging, maybe doing some mature reflection. And I mean, I've heard this, um, that there are people who are not necessarily religious, but they have even said they've seen a higher percentage of like relationship stability because they waited. They're not even religious, or it wasn't something that came from like a faith-based decision. It was just like they saw the benefit in waiting, and they've seen that their relationships have seen, you know, less of the drama. So, you know what I mean? I feel like there's benefit even outside of a faith-based perspective.
Mm. Mm. It's funny because I was just reading an article last night. I'll tell you what the name of the article was. It's written by a bunch of Bible scholars, New Testament Bible scholars. Name of the article is "Can a Man Commit Pornea with His Wife?" So let me explain the context. Famous line from Jesus: "No divorce." And Matthew says no divorce except for sexual immorality. Now, what some scholars will say is, obviously, we know that Jesus spoke in Aramaic, uh, and then you're getting transferred over into the Greek when it comes to scholars starting to copy the Gospels, and they use the word pornea to represent sexual morality. Now, was pornea the right word to describe what the word was in Aramaic? Don't know. That's still up for debate to some extent. But What happens is when you use the term pornea and you get into the cultural context that was prevalent at the time in around 100 AD or so, and around early Christian and Jewish culture, the word pornea really refers to sexual immoral acts, right? So this is important because people oftentimes use the Bible to accuse and denigrate and attack members of the LGBT community. And they say, well, let's go to Romans. Let's go to other scriptures where Paul does say, right, they've been giving themselves over to the lust of the flesh, men with men, women with women. That's paraphrasing. At that time, though, there really was no concept of someone's psychological orientation connected to their sexual preference. And that's really, from what some scholars are saying, emerged after Freud. Freud was 1800s to about 1930s. He passed away, 1937, 38. So in the heyday of like the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, start getting this idea of sexual orientation, that you have an orientation, like a psychological preference, is something in your mind towards a particular person or persons. Even it has nothing to do with sex acts, right? You could be committed and want to be with women and not having sex, right? When I was a kid, right, my sexual orientation, and I mean teen, right, I was having sex, but you could say was woman. For someone else, it might have been a man or woman, etc. But they had no concept of that. It was just a man and a woman in acts and ACTS, right? So there was just certain acts. But what happens is when you get into sexual immorality, and this is where it gets interesting, is that there were acts that they considered wrong. And so what ended up happening as time went along, again, 100 AD, the early Christian church and Jewish traditions, is that any act between a man and a woman, because that's what it's just men and women, that's what they're thinking. They're not thinking, well, there's also two spirits and days, at least in that culture, it wasn't there. Any sexual act that was not for procreation is pornea. So having sex for pleasure, having sex, oral sex, anal sex, all that stuff. Anytime you're having sex outside of procreation is pornea. I'm going to read this last comment from the conclusion based on the scholars who wrote this article. Yeah, here we go. This more expansive meaning from the Second Temple writes that the church fathers should likely be assumed to be meaning of pornea for New Testament written as well. In particular, we should assume this broader meaning for Paul in the Gospel of Matthew, right? We talked about Paul and talking about sex acts in Romans and other places. Though it may seem difficult to pinpoint exactly what this word study means for modern readers of the New Testament, we believe the answer is quite simple. By the reckoning of early Christian authors, including those of the New Testament, anyone who has engaged, okay, here we go. Anyone who has engaged in a sexual act and enjoyed it is guilty of pornea. This means, of course, the modern attempt to relegate pornea to same-sex acts and sex outside of marriage should be reevaluated. It's not just sex acts outside of marriage that were deemed illicit and were condemned by Second Temple Jews and early Christians. Certain acts within marriage, I'll say it again, certain acts within marriage are also received the stigma of pornea. Thus, we return to our original question. Can a man commit pornea with his wife? In certain circumstances, the answer of the New Testament written was yes, he can. So me, the man who talks about eating pussy, loves eating pussy, swimming and eating pussy, sinning against the Lord. This is why I think sometimes when you read the Bible, it says, people said, this teaching is hard. It gets really difficult because we have developed a culture of demonizing others and their sex acts. Yet for those who follow Jesus, or originally called the way, most of the sex acts they engage in their marital bed are problematic.
Been seen as,
Now, I don't know what Paul said when he meant, the marriage bed is undefiled. So was that Paul starting to move the needle a certain way?
Who knows? But I mean, I think that's the thing about the Bible. Why a lot of people find it hard to try and follow it, because it seems like there's so many fallacies and oxymoronic statements that are in the same book.
Well, the
So,
Song of Solomon's all about sex. Some scholars argue that it's literally about two people who aren't married. You talk about her, she says, I'm walking through the night and the watchman almost beat me for being a prostitute. These people aren't married.
right.
So the
Right.
Bible has a lot of things different to say about sex. Spilling your seed on the floor because you don't want to impregnate your sister-in-law, even though your brother's dead, to continue his line. These are all just interesting facts. That's in the Tanakh.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is because we're having this conversation. We're running up against time here, but let's just be brief as much as possible. I'm not saying I connect with every single Christian tradition expectation around sex. It's stuff I believe in, stuff I'm still working through. But I do believe that there needs to be more care and concern and emphasis placed on how you, the person, the general you, engage and prepare yourself for a long-term commitment that everyone seems, when you talk to them one-on-one, that they're looking for. And when you invest that time, just indiscriminate, having having sex with multiple partners, indiscriminate sex with multiple partners, as I said earlier, you're not really investing the time in working on yourself and preparing yourself for a marriage or long-term commitment that could hopefully be edifying and building for not only you, but for the family and legacy that you're trying to create. I even think back to my own personal time. Had I had more skills, had I focused more on my career, less hanging out, I would have more to present to a woman so that the marriage life could be a lot more easier. What do I mean? It really makes a difference. And we're seeing this now with research saying that most women go through postpartum for 7 years after giving birth. It really makes a difference if you're a man who can say, yo, listen, I'm making X amount of money a year because I invested in myself and my career and my businesses and my opportunities. So when we have a baby or two and you want to take those years off, your job is always going to be there, but I can hold this down and you don't have to worry about it. These are the kinds of opportunities. That's not going to work for everyone all the time, but these are the kinds of opportunities that are available for people and that can move the needle and enhance and create a more sustainable, healthy partnership and relationship if you take the time to prepare for it. And how do you make the time prepare for it? You can't go out to the club every night. You can't be beaten and trying to get your hands and knocking everything that you want down, because the more time you spend on that, the less time you have to work on that Amazon, drop shipping business idea you had, or that copywriting skill you want to create, or that graphic design skill that would create opportunities for you, and maybe you can go work as a UX designer at Google and make $300K a year. You're not doing that when you're always having a good time satisfying the quote unquote
The
need that you
flesh.
have.
Yeah. Satisfying your flesh. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's some real, like I said, it's a gem. I definitely think it's something to think about. It resonated with me. But I just feel like, I don't know, some of it feels kind of like a prescriptive reality. Like, it would be ideal for everybody not to engage so kind of frivolously. But I mean, yo, we live in a culture where sex is as normal and pervasive as brushing your teeth and breathing air. So it's like, I
Well, it's
don't know
not for
how to
everybody.
really,
Yeah.
right. So I mean, I don't really know how to inject that into our society's norm. Like you said, you're not necessarily advocating for people to wait because that's hard, but it's like people definitely need what you call a mature reflection a lot of times before they jump into this bucket and
Yeah.
start flowing down the river, because the waves get big.
Yeah.
You'll capsize in that boat
Oh yeah, you will. White water rafting for real.
and be drowning, swimming in women with their own condominiums.
5 + 5. And on
No
that
diddy,
note,
no diddy.
yeah. And on that note, thank you guys again. Check out www.lovegodlovesexpodcast.net. Lots of free goodies there for you. All you got to do is just put in your email and we'll get those content to you ASAP. Until next time, take care. Thank you.